Welcome to Tony at 12. I'm Tony LeBlanc, and today I'm in conversation with Jonathan Craymer of Shayype, a technology company whose mission is to improve digital security. Jonathan, good to see you.
And to you, and see you as well. Thanks, Tony.
Well, let's start off with the current position with what I suppose we could call old tech, shall we? And that I suppose is the current situation with bank accounts. But before we get to that, is there any regulation in place at the moment, or do we rely on individual organisations to do the regulation bit?
Well, actually, that's a very good question. I know you like to hear people say that, but it is because there's actually no regulation on things like passwords.
Yeah.
So passwords is kind of a thing out in the ether that has no governing body at all. I remember once at a trade show saying, "Oh, shame the market leader isn't here," and people looking around saying, "What, Microsoft or whatever?" No, the password. The password is the world's leader in how we prove who we are online, and there is no regulation apart from maybe people in organizations coming down on people for not changing their password quickly enough or whatever. But and as for the rest of it, no, there is no global standard. There was a kind of an informal standard invented by one security company, which has kind of set the tone, where they said you should have, if you don't want to use just a password is, say, one factor, you'd have something you know, which is a password, then you'd have one of something you are, which is a biometric, fingerprint or whatever, or you'd have something in your possession, which in their case, that was the whole idea really, was to sell these little bits of plastic, I don't know if I've got one on my desk, with a little readout, and it gave you a 6-digit number. So you'd have kind of 3 factors and you'd choose 2 of them. And that's where we got the name 2-factor. But no, there's no regulation.
Does that concern you?
Oh, very much. Yeah, because we've been kind of, most of us, forced into using the online world, and the online world wants people to be safe, I guess. Why wouldn't they be? But they don't seem to be doing anything about our online safety or security. And it's always worried me, and I'm sure anybody who thinks about it, if you type in a password and off it goes into the ether, there's a box on your screen, you go, type in password, where does it go? Who can see it? Who can copy it or write it down? You've no idea. You're just sending it off. And it's a bit like, in my mind, hanging your front door key of a night outside your front door. And you've no idea if somebody's gone past with well, it is.
Yeah, sure. Couldn't agree more. Yeah,
copied
yeah.
it. Yeah. And then when they've got a copy, you don't know. I remember talking to one of our most senior detectives in what used to be, is now the Serious Crime Agency. I think it's called Soccer or something before that. And they got a video at a trade show saying, if we lose something like a mobile phone with information on it, we self-confess. We say, "Oh, I've lost my phone." And I said, "Well, what if you lost a password?" And the guy took the point. I mean, the problem with passwords is you don't know they've gone, and yet they are probably the most important thing. And that's why we, as a little startup, are trying to do something about this. And we're amazed that the world doesn't seem to be doing exactly the same. There are initiatives by Microsoft and others. They think they can go passwordless. But we think if it's possible to put a one-time code, so it's like a password, you get a one-time code that's different every time, and it's on the screen in front of you, and that replaces not only your password, but the need for 2-factor. So you don't need devices and phones and other things. You get a different code every time, which nobody else could reproduce.
Tell me, let's look at my personal banking situation without
I'd rather not.
Without divulging the overdraft.
Right.
But let's look at it from the point of view that I use online banking. To get into the account, I have to put in a username, which I'm probably a bit remiss because I've told the bank to remember that aspect of it. I then have a key question, which relates to the first motor car I ever had. And then I use a pad, which I have access to via a 4-digit number, which then throws up a 6-digit code to get into the account. Is this unsafe in your view?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just reaching sideways because you're talking about one of these.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
That's technically called a sleeve reader because it has a slot in the top and you put a card in it. That's not actually generating a one-time code. All that does is confirm that you've got your card and PIN with you. So it's exactly as if you were in a bank putting that into an ATM or out in the street. That doesn't produce a one-time code. So all that is falling into the trap that much of the world has, that we can authenticate ourselves with something in our possession. So your bank says, Tony, have this card and this PIN. If you've got the two of those, you've got something in your possession that proves who you are. The trouble is, it doesn't prove who you are. If somebody has got hold of the PIN, there used to be lots of scams. Fortunately, there are less now, but somebody might jam up an ATM, look over your shoulder as you put in your PIN, and you'd go off thinking, oh dear, it's got jammed in the machine. And they can then take out the card and they've got your card and PIN. Yeah. And actually these things, one of the problems with these sleeve readers is that they are all the same. They are interchangeable, which a lot of people don't know. They think, oh, this is my NatWest or my Barclays sleeve reader. They're actually built to a standard. So if a fraudster has got one of these, has your card and PIN, he can become you.
Yeah, sure.
That's good,
yeah. Couldn't agree more. The other point that I wanted to put to you is that credit card purchases these days, of course, it's a sort of tap and run situation up to £100, which I don't particularly like in any case, but that is where it is. But if it's over there and the card provider feels a little bit wary about who you're trying to do business with, they will send through to the mobile phone or email an authentication code. What happens on that one, Jonathan? Is that pretty vulnerable?
Yeah, it's a lazy way, and they should be ashamed of themselves, quite honestly. In my view, it's almost negligence. That all they're doing is going, we will send to your phone. Yeah. Got all my props. It's not actually going to your phone. It goes to your mobile number.
Yeah.
The trouble is somebody else can get hold of your mobile number and pretend to be you. There's a well-known MO for criminals. They can take over a mobile account simply by getting hold of a new SIM card, and they put it in their phone, and they then get the security codes. So if a bank or Microsoft, loads of people use this, it's become custom and practice, and in my view, it's very lazy, and it isn't really fit for purpose.
Looking at Google, Facebook, etc., you've made the point. We've been in contact, obviously, that they're trying to phase passwords out completely. What is their logic there?
Well, they know that passwords are not good. And there is a point there that a password, because it's unchanged during its lifetime, that if you can get hold of it, you can, well, if a bad person gets hold of your password, they can pretend to be you. In fact, I've seen case studies where, say, the managing director of a firm was accused of looking at inappropriate stuff. All that had happened, apparently, was that somebody else had got hold of his password. But that, like hanging your door key outside, means somebody can easily pretend to be you. So the problem, okay, here's something that might surprise many people watching this. Everything, and please correct me if I'm wrong, everything that we use to prove who we are in today's tech world, which is one of the big mistakes that the tech giants and everybody's got wrong, everything we use is stealable. Everything is stealable. Think about it. You've got your face shape, fingerprints, the bank card you just mentioned, your phone, hardware devices like YubiKeys. All these things can be stolen, including, of course, passwords, personal details. I've written down that your password is based on your first car. I must look that up. I'm sure I can find that out. Thanks.
I challenge you. I challenge you.
Okay. Well, but thanks for it. It just illustrates about personal information. So really and truly, it was a great mistake trying to do away with the password. But to come back to your question about Google and Facebook and so on, my wife had an instruction from a financial organization: stop using passwords. And the only alternatives being offered, and this is pretty universal, you can ask anybody who's dealing with such organizations, is to get a one-time code via text or SMS, which is not very secure for the reason I've mentioned. Somebody else could have taken over your phone.
Yeah.
Or email can easily be taken over, so that's not secure either. And the other thing that people can use is what's called an authenticator app, which is supposed to be a more secure way of delivering a code to your phone. The downside is it's rather complicated to set up, and it really isn't the solution to passwords, the replacement for passwords that the world needs. And I've spoken to many techies who should think, oh yeah, Authenticator, it's great. It was invented by Google in 2011. Microsoft brought out its own version in 2015 or thereabouts, and many other people have got their own authenticator. It's not simple. That's the problem. I mean, even my own home techie says he groans inwardly when a message comes up and says, find your device. And inevitably, particularly in my wife's case, the phone's downstairs when she's upstairs on the computer. It's just not good. So we thought with our Shayype system that if we can actually produce a one-time code very securely on your screen, it's all there and it does it all, and it's more secure than anything that's currently on the market.
Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. You've been involved in tech for a few years, I guess.
I don't have a tech background. When people say what's your background, I just say shady. But no, I'm a former journalist, and so that's what I've earned a crust with most of my life, and it's now extremely stale. No, I thought of a pin reminder back in I think it's about 2005 when chip and pin came in, and I created a little cardboard pin reminder where you put in your pins. The crucial thing was you write them into a grid in a pattern, and that gave rise to the idea of producing patterns on a device where it actually produces then a one-time code. So no, I don't have a technical background, but it's frightening to think that I first got involved in this particular project at the end of 2005, and it's taken a lot of false starts. You start working with a group of colleagues and they can't do various things, and then you move on and different colleagues promise other things and so on. Now at last we seem to be making progress, and so I'm also perhaps time has moved on. Now is the time when the tech world can think, actually, we're not succeeding. Cybercrime's getting worse. Businesses are more and more afraid of things like ransomware. So maybe now is the time for something new. And our ingredient, we hope, can improve all sorts of things. Virtually anything could use a Shayype one-time code, from ATMs, door locks, health monitoring, defense, law enforcement, etc. So
can you explain to us, and bearing in mind I'm non-tech, elderly and non-savvy on everything, how does Shayype actually work?
Okay. Here's a quick little. I don't know if you can see that. There's a grid of squares with numbers on them, and a one-time code is simply hidden in that. A sequence of, say, 6 single digits, and you have previously set up a pattern or shape, basically a collection of cells, which is your new secret. So instead of a password, when you come to register for a website or a financial company, you tell it which cells you want, and they stay the same. And when you see a grid like that on the screen, you just read off the numbers in your particular cells. And then next time, because the numbers have switched round, you get a different code. So your pattern stays the same, but your numbers have switched round. So a particular cell might have had a 1 in it. Next time it's got a 5 in it, etc. And there's also lots of repetition on the grid. We use a restricted character set so that you've got at least 6 repetitions of every character. So even if somebody sees you entering a code starting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the cell has got 1 in it, but there are 6 of those. So it's extreme, and so on along your code. It's very difficult, almost impossible to reverse engineer. And then at the back end of it, and we have a patent on this, well, we've got a patent on the front end and the back end. Our clever tech people have invented a system which stores your pattern extremely securely. So even if somebody were to break into a database, they couldn't reverse engineer it. They couldn't get away with something that would enable them to use the Shayype system.
So, for example, could the actual shape on the grid be the letter L, or does it have to? Yeah, so it could be anything like that, could it?
Yeah. It doesn't have to be joined up. It can just be a collection of cells, and we're hoping that people will perhaps at some point start even kind of swapping tips about crafty shapes or patterns that they've. It's called Shayype, obviously, because it's a shape or a pattern that you adopt as your secret. But yes, it could be any collection of cells as long as you make it memorable and you don't tell anybody what your new secret is.
So you're carrying it around in your head.
Yeah. So like a password, you carry something in your head.
Yeah.
But this is never exposed in use, which is why it's so secure.
Yeah. So how do you work on the basis of getting organisations on board for this? Because I mean, it seems to me to be a fairly obvious thing to do, but presumably trying to convince large banks and other institutions that they should take this on as an alternative to what they've got isn't that easy.
No. Next
a challenge.
No, it's yeah. Well, yeah, and allied to that is why hasn't everybody jumped on this particular bandwagon? I guess the answer to all those questions is that different organizations perhaps are going down their own development routes. For instance, Microsoft seems convinced that we will be able to authenticate with, say, a thumbprint or something on our mobile. So our mobile becomes the tool that we use every time we authenticate. The problem there is, and I actually just had this overnight, my phone for some reason didn't charge. So what do? Phone is effectively gone. I haven't got another battery around. My sister-in-law managed to drop hers down the loo and she was staying with us recently. These solutions that are completely dependent on a phone, I'm afraid, are really just leading you into periods of complete inability to log in. If something happens to your phone, it can also get stolen, etc. Not a good idea to base everything on the phone. And the same applies to other hardware devices. And let me also say at this point, if you think that, having mentioned thumb, that your biometrics, I've met loads of people of a certain age who say, oh yeah, I've got my iPhone and my thumb, they're all I need. Well, if you think that's going to be all you need for the rest of your life, you've got another thing coming. I mean, the problem with biometrics, like fingerprints, voice, face, they are exposed all the time. Did you wipe the last cup you used in a cafe, for instance, or the last door handle you touched? There was a team of Chinese white hat hackers at a conference, I think in 2019, who showed that they could, from drinking glasses, get people's fingerprints and open their accounts. And as soon as I saw that, I thought, biometrics is not the future. Again, it's another stealable thing.
Yeah, sure. And presumably, as far as voice recognition is concerned, artificial intelligence in time, even if it can't do it yet, could easily mimic your voice to the point where it was accepted by the provider that you were trying to get into.
I'm not well. I've never actually read that it is good enough, but it can't be far off. And I'll tell you the thing about AI that really terrifies me. I mean, it's bad enough already, but can you imagine having an email that says, "Hi Tony, it was good to see you at the barbecue last weekend on Alderney, etc., etc." And it has come from somebody who looks as though they know you well, but it was actually found out by AI.
Yeah. Actually, I've come across a few of those sort of things, even now, where, a dear friend is in dire straits, this sort of thing. And as you say, it's not that difficult for them to get even more sophisticated, I guess. So what are your hopes in terms of marketing it to the tech giants?
Actually, without giving any names away, we've literally overnight we've had a meeting arranged with a very, very large company. It's the second large company we've spoken to recently. So interest seems to be gathering pace, and we've also got a letter of intent from a possible end user company, which dishes out payslips to thousands and thousands of people. I think the world, fortunately, is now coming around to the idea that it hasn't got the toolkit it needs at this point, and it really needs to start looking at other things. So we are very hopeful that this meeting, literally next week, with this huge company, could bear fruit. But by and large, it's been an uphill struggle, yes, because banking regulations stop a lot of banks looking at new things. I mean, I can remember talking to somebody in one of the big credit card organizations saying, "Oh yeah, no problem. We have a 5-year plan to fight fraud." And I thought, I bet the fraudsters don't have a 5-year plan. They have a 5-minute plan. Yeah. Actually, can I just mention something on that?
Yeah, please do.
We would love to make an arrangement with, and this could do all sorts of good things for the world, with one or more big data agencies, the likes of people who know what fridge you bought 10 years ago and where you lived 5 years ago and so on. So they really know you, and somebody like a credit card could receive a bogus application, and then they would be able to contact you. You would be able to prove who you are through your association with Experian, Equifax, or whatever. And they would say, "Tony, was this your credit card application?" This is the big fear. Whenever there's it's in the public domain. There was a big company based just around the corner from me called Zelis, which was in the news a few months back because they do payroll for a number of big companies.
Yeah.
And they had a huge data breach. And the big fear is that loads of fraudsters, and they can kind of probably automate this now, can make bogus applications for opening accounts and so on. So my idea, or our idea as a company, would be that with the help of big data companies, card companies could go back to the actual user and say, was this your application? No, fine, it's dead.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah. I mean, I would have thought that the banks in particular should be prepared to move on this because, you know, the amount of money that they're having to pay back in terms of scams and things like this. I mean, I know that they try and avoid it if they can, but ultimately, you can sort of claim under, is it Section 73 or something like that, if it's a credit card. And, you know, anything I would have thought they could do to tighten up the procedure must make sense.
Sure. And I mean, a lot of people would say, okay, well, it's not hitting them too hard yet, and it's a numbers game. They can afford to recompense people. But morally, you have to remember that the ill-gotten gains of the fraudsters is being spent on all sorts of bad things like drugs and and terrorism, possibly. So it's not a good idea to allow it to continue, and anything we can do should be done to stop it.
When we had a chat the other day on the phone, we were talking about whether or not this system could have a beneficial effect on child safety online. Have you taken that any further?
Not yet, but we want to very much, and we love to have things like this included in the online harms or protection, whatever it is, bill. Same thing as, say, credit card registrations. We think it would be a great idea if big data agencies could allow everybody to register, and then say you've got a teenager in a chat room, and he or she could then say, is this person I'm talking to of the age that they claim? They could check all sorts of attributes about the other person. The great thing is they don't even need a name, so it's non-intrusive. They just go, is this person also 14 or whatever they claim to be? Are they in Great Britain or are they in Europe or whatever? And so you'd be able to continue a conversation in reasonable security. We think that would make a huge difference to weed out things like online groomers.
Yeah, because this is a big problem, isn't it? Groomers kidding the person on the other end of the line that they're a similar age, whereas, you know, they could be any age, and it's very concerning.
It's actually, but it's the universal problem with the internet. I mean, we've created this thing where you can pretend to be anything you like.
Yeah. It really is a concern from that point of view. So, Shayype is underway, and yeah, okay, and obviously, if anyone wants to have a look at the website, Jonathan, could you just repeat the website, please?
It's www.shayype, and that's SHAYYPE.com. And
okay.
we'd love to talk to any organizations. I mean, we think eventually we'd like to have plugins for things like WordPress websites. We'd love to be able to help charities and other third sector organizations to up their game. One of the problems that charities have is that they're staffed or helped by thousands of volunteers whose data is held on a database, and often charities don't have the funding for good online protection. So that's just one example of many where we think something like this could improve the safety of the online world. Yeah.
It's been very interesting talking to you about this, and thank you very, very much for sparing me some time. It's certainly a thought that I think we've all got to take on board.